right. Well, and there we go. Now we're all here. Thanks everybody for joining, and welcome everybody to the May 2025 Post-TweetJam panel, sponsored by SWOOP Analytics. Thank you so much, Cai, for participating this year, and of course, just the timeliness of this, that we came across each other, ran into each other at the M365 conference, and had this discussion on this topic. And why don't you start up, introduce yourself as a sponsor, but also the report, the study that you guys just released.
Oh, thanks, Christian. Thanks for having me. So I'm Cai, and I'm one of three co-founders of SWOOP Analytics, and we help, internal communications, intranet folks with analytics for everything around everything Microsoft and their digital communication channels. And as a part of that, we also invest a lot of time and effort in benchmarking and helping people understand how these intranets and internal social media, how they work. And we just published last week our third SharePoint intranet benchmarking report that looked at more than 160,000 pages for more than 250,000 people across lots of different organizations, to really understand how content is performing, how much time people spent reading news or not reading news, and content pages, and what job titles and roles do it, and how long time they spend with the intranet, and all those things. So that's all available now.
Excellent. Well, of course, we've been sharing the links during the TweetJam itself. We will share out the links, and I'll have the links how you can find that report out on the summary blog post as well. But we'll jump into questions.
I forgot actually, Christian, because the reason why that triggered this conversation was that we have a whole section about AI on intranets. I forgot to mention that important part.
Yeah, and we're going to get into a lot of that in the conversation as well. But quick introductions here for the other two panelists. Kevin, why don't you go first?
Good morning. So Kevin Zollinger, I work at a company called JourneyTEAM. We're highly invested in artificial intelligence and helping our clients get the most value out of AI. I've been doing technology, I was just doing the math, almost 4 decades now. And so I've been able to see a lot of shifts and a lot of changes. I've seen the shift from DOS to Windows and client PCs to internet PCs. I don't think I've ever seen a shift be quite as dramatic and fast as this shift to AI. This is just mind-boggling speed, and I'm excited to be part of it.
And you don't need to put decades in there. Just say that you're of a certain age of what you remember.
I'm seasoned.
I'm already forgetting some technology. That's how of an age I am. Yeah, Sharon.
Hi, I am Sharon Weaver, and I am the founder and CEO of Smarter Consulting. We're a Microsoft modern work solution partner. Same thing, we live in that M365 space every day. I am also of a certain age and well-seasoned. So I've been around as long as intranets have existed as well. So yeah.
Well, exciting stuff. Well, we're going to just jump right in, as we do with these panels. And so jump over to this view. Question number 1. What does being AI first really mean? And how does it go beyond? I guess I should have prefaced all of this with the topic, what it really takes to become an AI first organization is what we're talking about here today. What does that really mean? How does it go beyond adopting AI tools? Anyone?
All right. So I have a view on this, right? Because for everything you disclosed, I don't think we're AI first yet, but I think I have a sense of what it takes. And I'm going to use an analogy with APIs. When we work with different organizations that we need to draw data from, you quickly find out whether they're an API-first organization. You can see it in the way that things are documented, the services are available, how the people think about the way that they're doing, and you get a sense of whether they're API-first or not. And for me, that kind of I look at ourselves and go, are we AI-first yet? And I go, no, we're sort of heading that way, but I look at it and go, what about our documentation? What we do, can you access our interface purely through AI? Is it just like a part of the DNA? No, not yet. But I think if I use that API analogy, I think I know what it ought to look like once we get there.
So to me, Christian, there's a spectrum where you go from being AI first as people. And so if I have a problem, if I have a question, I don't go search anymore. I talk to an AI. And I want a piece of code. I want a question to an answer. I want to hoop the ball game last night. for an AI first organization, as they think about how their processes should flow, as they think about how they should do work, they start with, how can I use generative AI to make this be better? And it becomes part of the woof and the weave of what that organization does and how they do it.
It's interesting to think about that too. I mean, is an AI first organization, can it really only happen from the ground up? Can it be a top down directive?
It has to be top down.
I think it has to be both, right? Because it has to be embraced and supported at an initiative level, but it also has to be embraced and adopted by the users.
Yeah,
I've rolled out an intranet sharing without top-down support, and it was one of the most painful things I've ever done. And this, I think, is even worse. If we have leadership that's not bought in, that's not giving those that are the ground up the time and the space to do that, to build the skills, to build the tools, I don't think you can be successful. I think it has to be driven from the top.
But again, if you don't have that ground up, if there's not the groundswell there, if the people aren't going and moving over to that, they're resisting. I agree with Sharon. I'm like, you have to have, you're right, you have to have the executive support for that. Mm-hmm. But it has to be both. You have to have people that are interested in moving that direction, there have to be real scenarios, real use cases, people getting value out of that at the ground level. And then the executive support saying, hey, here's a directive. This is what we're doing as an organization.
So at the ground level, you're going to get people that are AI first people, and they're going to get the value, and they're going to see less toil in their lives, and they're going to be excited about it. But to really become a frontier organization where it's in everything that you do, your CEO has to have gone through that process, and your CEO has to say, okay, now I want to do this for the company.
Yeah. So I'm going to throw a stick in the spokes of this. I said, like, can you be an AI first organization if your governance is a hot mess? If you're having to clean up, and if you're building up that structure, like, can you go and leverage all the new technology and change the culture of the way that you use productivity tools and everything else if you don't have the governance pieces in place?
You absolutely can. But just like any maturity, when we talk about maturity levels and we talk about an immature, organization, a certain competency, if we think about AI being its own competency, if you're low maturity level and you don't have those governance controls and you don't have things in place, then you can roll it out. You can tell everybody to use it, and then everybody will see things they're not supposed to see, and they'll be able to do things they're not supposed to be able to do. And it goes back to the whole conversation we had when search rolled out, and people were accessing things they shouldn't be able to access because Copilot doesn't know better. Copilot has access to those things, and it can do things that they don't realize, and it's going to let them get away with things that are not managed.
And the difference, Sharon, is when I, as a person, am doing search, I'm going to hit the top 5 or 6 links.
Right.
You and Christian are better workers than I am. You're going to go 10 or 12, right? Copilot goes 1,000. And in search result number 872, Copilot's going to find something you didn't want found. Yep. And so in the area of Copilot, security through obscurity just doesn't work anymore.
Agreed.
No, it wouldn't be the first time, would it, that we rolled out tools without governance, without thinking about it, and sort of going like, we just did IT, turn it on and see what happens. And then, users wake up in 6 months, they go, that was awful. It worked well at home, but here at work, it's terrible. And I think that would be such a missed opportunity.
Yeah. Overall, you just have to think about it being like a whole mindset shift and a change management and adoption strategy, not just a new tool.
Well, and your security becomes so important, and your document management processes and procedures, you can't fake it anymore.
Right.
No, actually, there's 2 things that bother me a little bit about this, right? It's the AI is being sold as being this, it's wonderful, it's easy, it's highly valuable. It's like, and I think if you're sitting there as an executive, you're going like, it's a no-brainer, just turn it on, and not realizing that phenomenal governance process that needs to go behind this. So when we did this internet benchmarking report, we lots of organizations are building little, whether they're SharePoint agents or they're building dedicated, like standalone, their own version of ChatGPT for the intranets. But when you look at the content governance around intranets, I think you are a certain age where you know the problems that go with managing intranet content, as with any other kind of, I guess, corporate content, right? And what I worry about the most, that there are two things, right? If the bot goes, I don't know, well, that's not a good user experience. But the worst thing is if it very confidently says, yes, Cai, you are entitled to 8 months of annual leave, based on an outdated policy or an incorrect one, as you point out, Kevin, the one that was document number 486 of the HR policies that suddenly, got promoted again or got published or something. I think that's a concern, is because a Copilot can very confidently tell us something that's not correct if it's grounded in the wrong information.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Well, question number 2. What are the biggest cultural or leadership shifts required to make AI a core capability, not just a side project? So, I mean, this goes to what you're talking about, Kevin, you have to have that executive sponsorship, but it's not enough just to say, hey, we're on board with it.
So I've had 2 great, amazing, awesome interactions with leaders. And we've done trainings where the leaders said, yeah, go do it. In the 2 trainings that were the best, the leaders showed up to kick off the trainings. And they talked about the importance of generative AI in the future of the firm. And the one training was like February, the very second that Microsoft made Copilot available to organizations with less than 300 licenses, right? He's a small org, he's 20 or 25 people. And he said, this is a year and a half ago, he said, I know right now that Copilot isn't yet a competitive advantage. I know that today it's going to help a little maybe, but I can see where this is going to be an absolute necessity. And I want us to have developed the muscle memory and the knowledge of how to use this tool. And so we're going to start before it's really, really valuable and build that. And it's that kind of foresight, vision, and willingness to plant the flag that I think makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what we were just talking about this last week with this client project that we're working on, just massive global company, and doing the trainings. And one of the questions, I mean, there's questions that come in, and where there's some people that are realizing, these other third party or standalone, these other generative AI platforms do this activity much, much better than Copilot does. And yet it's like, yes, but they don't have the depth. They don't have the integration with the M365 platform. They're not tied into the rest that you're doing in the day-to-day activities. And so a lot of what we're training people on now, and I'm sure all of us will go through this if you're doing any kind of Copilot training, adoption, onboarding, any user training at all, is figuring out how it changes the day-to-day simple little things that you're doing, and more automate some of those things. So it's, I mean, like the rest of the automation stories out there that we've been telling for years around Power Platform and even back before that. I mean, using like Zapier and, if this, then that, and other automations. Remember a few years ago, I created an automation. So while I'm driving with my car, which is an iPhone, talking to Siri and linking Siri to my, then it was before To Do, it was the Wunderlist. Is that right? That they bought, that Microsoft acquired.
I love Wunderlist.
Integration there. And then figuring that out with when it made the change over to Do, so that I could sit there hands free in my car, talking to my phone, which is on a different, OS, but saving tasks to my to-do list. Like that was, things like that, those kinds of personal productivity enhancements, automation through AI. You're going to see more and more of that kind of stuff, to where you're going to start forgetting about the stuff that you used to do, the simple little things, and find that you are, and here's my joke from those of us that are of a certain age. It's that Palmolive moment where you're going to realize your hand is already soaking in the AI.
Yeah.
I know, Cai, if that translates to your part of the world, the old Palmolive soap, dish soap ads from the 70s and 80s. But yeah.
I'm familiar with the brand, but not the particular ad, I must admit.
Okay,
I also grew up in Denmark, and did half my life there and half the life in Australia, so I might have missed that one.
Yeah.
So Sharon talked about the drama we all went through when search rolled out. And to me, what that says is that the other thing that Copilot has that nobody else does is decades and decades of securing content and making it available only to the right person at the right time under the right circumstances. Nobody else has those decades of experience. And so you probably could figure out a way to take another AI and give it just full-blown access to all your crap. You probably could do that, but it would have no way of securing that content so only the right eyes were given access to it. If you're a Microsoft shop, Copilot's your one answer.
Yeah, agreed.
And go back to the question too, though. Talk about specifically cultural or leadership shifts that are required to really bring AI to focus.
We were just kind of chatting about this pre-show, but I think when we think about cultural stuff, leadership has to embrace it as, kind of a new way of doing things. And I think, when I meet organizations that are like, don't mention that you used AI to your boss, to that leadership perspective, and they're nervous to use it, they're scared to use it, they look at it as cheating, they look at it as, how am I getting around this, as opposed to, we are now all using AI and we expect to use AI, but we expect you to use it responsibly and sustainably and the way that you're supposed to use it. And we're going to create opportunities and we're going to make sure that things are set up correctly and we're going to create governance and processes and policies around it. I think the way that leadership thinks about how AI is implemented in the organization and how they treat people using it really makes a big difference as to how people, see it and adopt it in their organization.
Did you see there was an article, was it in the Wall Street Journal, about Johnson & Johnson and all the experiments they've been running?
Yep.
I can't remember, but it was a lot of experiments, right? And then after that, then they boiled it down to make, it was like 20 scenarios that they felt these were the most high value ones. And for me, that signals a lot about the, I guess, the cultural readiness to experiment and go out and try. And it doesn't matter if you find out that, half of them or 3/4, 80% fail, that's fine. If you find those golden nuggets where it's really going to add value. And I think that willingness to experiment, learn and fail, and even go out to the Wall Street Journal, be interviewed about it. I think that tells you a lot about their agility and mindset. And I didn't kind of expect that for a traditional pharma like Johnson & Johnson. I thought with compliance and and regulation that they would be like last in the queue, but they seem to be at the front.
Well, again, go back to, you think of like the cultural change. It goes back to with a lot of the pace of change of technology in general, we have to be organizations like culturally sharing our learnings. You have to set that up to make it easier and reward people, recognize them, reward people for sharing innovations that they're doing in their day-to-day. It's like one of my favorite things about in Copilot in the prompt library is the fact that you can then share, save off your own prompts and different things that you've done and share that out. And I could use it myself. I could share it with my team. I can send it up to the admin for approval to share it with the entire organization. But so it's a great way to, I think that is a major cultural change that needs to happen for too many organizations that just are not currently sharing to that degree. So
when you think about the end user, we think about our rank and file frontline workers. A lot of those are concerned about AI is going to take my job. I mean, it's the elephant in the room and we're concerned about that. So if leadership comes to those people and say, okay, we're going to roll out AI because we want to take the toil out of your job, take out the repetitive stuff that you hate doing but have to do. We're going to take that toil out so that you can spend more time adding more value and enjoy your job better. I dare you to find me an employee that's not going to be enthusiastic and engaged after that.
I agree. I went through a fast food restaurant the other day that has the new speaker with the AI to take your order. And I think that's all kind of fun and cool. So we tend to go more often just because it's fun. And we did our order and we pulled up and there was a couple of errors that we, discussed with the person at the window. And we were like, AI is not quite taking your job, is it? And he was like, it can have it. It's like, because he's like, I'm back here doing this job instead and not having to sit and not understand and not ask the questions. It's like, it is helping me do my job. And he was really actually very positive to your point. He was very excited about the fact that he was not, giving up his job. He was getting the better part of his job by AI assisting him to do the parts that he didn't necessarily want to do. And I thought that was really exciting to see that viewpoint.
Yep. It's all about the message.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of on message here, question number 3 here. How should organizations rethink their information architecture and infrastructure to support AI at scale? I mean, this goes right back to what I brought up at the beginning. Can you really be AI first if you've not gone through and strengthened your governance and your IA?
I mean, can you have technology without strengthening governance? Can you buy software without having governance or proper data management and security in place? Can you implement anything without all that? Of course you can.
Right.
You can turn anything on you want. You can give anything out to your employees that you want. You can hand it out all day. Will it work the way that it's supposed to? Will it work the way you expect it to? Will you end up with a positive experience? Probably not. It
reminds me of the SharePoint migration, back in the on-prem days, and be like, okay, it's the I packed away. We always use the moving example that if I've actually helped people move in my neighborhood where they hadn't packed anything, the truck was there, and they had to be out by a certain time, and so we were literally taking dirty dishes, dirty pots out of the sink, shoving them in a box to get it on the truck, to get them out in time for these people that had not prepared. They had not gone through all that. And
you're a better man than I, Christian. I would have left.
Yeah, well, we're helping them out. But that's like a lot of the people just think it's like, well, I've got all this garbage. I've not done this cleanup. I've not done the hard work. I've not gone through with my life cycle management of the rest of this content. But AI now at the front end will fix that. Yeah, about as much as
clean up my data
search, how that fixed everything, or moving to the cloud somehow just magically fixed all that stuff. Like, no, nothing, none of this will fix that. You still need to go do that hard work up front.
So I keep shaking my head no, that you can't do this without doing the governance first. And Microsoft just in the last couple of months has released new tooling where you can say, okay, AI Copilot, you've got these 5 sites. That's all you get. And we can take all that dirty laundry, all those dirty dishes, and put them in a box and ignore them, right? And that might avoid the oversharing that we're all worried about. That might avoid the I found a document I shouldn't have found that we're all worried about. But it also just completely hamstrings the value of Copilot in your organization.
Yeah.
And so you're choosing the lesser option so that you don't cause problems. And the better option is to get your governance right and then roll out Copilot. It's important that we get it soon, but we don't have to have it today. Let's get it when it's right.
I do have I hear what you're saying, and I do really agree with. I mean, of course, you've got to have cleanup, you've got to have governance, but I'm also looking at these organizations that have, thousands of SharePoint sites, and most of it, like the reality of doing a cleanup for that, if you haven't had proper governance in place, and I think the minority have proper governance in place. For them that I talked to, it feels monumental and impossible. So I think that the idea of going, well, we trust this particular repository where we do have good governance. And for this particular scenario, it could be, for instance, the HR policies. We do feel that this area is it's useful, it's beneficial to have AI sitting on top of that. And then once we've proven that works, well, maybe we look at some of the other policies we have. Maybe look at health and safety. Maybe we look at the sales documentation. Maybe we look at the project management methodology and supporting templates and guidelines and things. So I think you then sort of it feels a little bit more that you are in control and maybe balance risk. Yeah, we're getting there. Anyway, I can see why that would be attractive.
In support of that answer there, and maybe Sharon and Kevin, you have a response to this, but I mean, because technically you could do that restrictive content that's their organizational data. Just because the process, again, just like when we used to go through the exercise of trying to identify from 1,000 different servers that we didn't have clear ownership of them. We had a process for that. We would send out messages on all those systems saying, hey, in 30 days, we're going to shut off access to these servers. 30 days later, 1,000 servers, that we shut things off, and within another 60 days we get a trickle in, maybe a third of those people are like, hey, I'm using that, you never responded, we turn it back on, we now know ownership, all that kind of stuff. But then 2/3 of them still no response. So then what we do is we lock out all permissions, we shut down access. Another third of people like, hey, I was using that, kind of thing. But a third of them, no one ever responds. And so we wipe the servers and repurpose the servers. And then some small percentage do show up like, 120 days later, like, what happened to my server? Like, hey, yeah, sorry, it's out. But, you could, with restrictive access to content, these limited number of SharePoint sites that are being well managed, well governed, and the fact that they have access to their content, their local, their like all the stuff, things they're working on, there's still a lot that you could prove out of the value of Copilot, of AI, just with what you have access to that is your content locally and these sites. So is that not an acceptable approach to doing a limited rollout of AI in an organization? Or are there problems by not giving it access to the rest of the body of content?
So I do something a little different than that, Christian, but it's very similar. And so we'll go do the inventory and here are the big groups in your tenant. These are the groups that have more than 200 people. I'm just picking a random number. And then we go and we inventory the SharePoint sites, and here are the SharePoint sites that these groups have access to. And we occasionally find a big group that we didn't know had access to something, but almost always it's going to be everyone except external, that magic group that we all add when we want people to see our content. And then we hit those owners with the Power Automate approval, and we say, hey, we're going to turn Copilot on. Is your content safe? Yes or no? If they say yes, they go into the index. Copilot now has them in their semantic index and can use that to ground and make answers. If they don't respond or they say no, we take everyone except external or the other big group out of the permissions for that SharePoint site. Copilot can't see it. And so whether it's 1,000 or 10,000, we run that process, and in 3 or 4 weeks, we know that somebody has said this content is appropriate for Copilot. And if they haven't said that, it's gone. And to your other point, Christian, that site owner still has access to their content. And the people that should be in that site can use Copilot to talk about that content, but the rest of the organization cannot.
Yeah. I think, at a very high level strategically, the point is have a plan. And Christian and I say this a lot when we do other things. We talk about this, have a plan of some sort. And do you have a plan or do you not have a plan? And if whatever your plan is in terms of adoption or change management or rollout or strategy, can you do it small and then grow? Absolutely. I think the one thing I will say on a positive side for that is what I see the highest amount of adoption around and the highest interest level in is Copilot Studio, which is creating custom agents for custom content that's all curated. And the number one question I get is, yeah, but I don't want to have access to everything. I only want to work with this small thing. So I think to some degree, it feels like organically that is what users are wanting to start with anyway. So it makes perfect sense to kind of start with the things we can control. But truthfully, I think as long as you have a strategic plan in some place, if you have high level governance around everything already, you're probably fine. But if not, at least having some sort of plan to roll that out, I think is better than not.
Well, and to Cai's example, if you wanted to point an agent at HR, that's a Studio pay as you go. And you're not buying anybody's license until you've demonstrated the value of it. Yeah. You spend your pennies.
Yep. Although I will say that I just caught a little bit of snippet as I was driving last night, and it was a radio program that was saying that basically the next thing to be concerned about that is part of New World Order taking over is these new AI agents, and it's the source of evil in the future. I thought that was pretty funny, as I'm loving building out AI agents. But
can I just add? There's just one more thing I'm
sure.
keen to add. When we talk about these agents, like there's also a difference. If you're building an agent for, let's say, to answer this example, the HR policies, you want to make absolutely sure that it stays right, on point. And so the way you do a system prompt, the way you set up the RAG, the way you control, if you're building like some of the things that what we've done where we're using Azure AI search, the way it returns and prioritizes results that are coming back, you really need to put some thought into making sure that it is as deterministic as possible and it doesn't, freeform. But if you have the same thing on maybe some marketing documentation, maybe maybe you're okay with a little bit more creativity and more, can do things differently, and you're not bound by this rigid set of rules. So I think and it comes back to your point, Sharon, about strategy and having a plan. You need to, like, agents are not just agents, right? It really depends on the business context, how accurate the response needs to be. There was the case against Air Canada, you might recall, where a consumer had been told that he could not get a refund for bereavement flight. Well, the chatbot had said he could. Air Canada said, sorry, you can't trust the bot. Of course, he can't get a rebate for that. But then he filed a case in the small claims court and he won the case. So, and you can imagine that playing out inside a company where someone is saying, am I entitled to, to annual leave? And the bot goes, sure. And your boss goes, hell no. Who's right? So I think that whole thing, we got to think a lot about what the purpose of the bots are. And for some, they will really want to control the bots and what they do way, way, way more detailed than maybe just a generic about summarize my meeting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, that's why I love that scenario. Like we keep using about like the employee handbook, and you can program it to say like only answer based on the data here in the employee handbook, and say like if you don't know the answer to that, to say like I do not have sufficient information here, and then automatically notify HR or whoever owns that, like, hey, here's a question that the handbook doesn't answer. Either respond directly back to the individual or expand the handbook and answer that question for future.
Well, it gets even better, Christian, because you can have that bot say, hey, I don't know that. Let me connect you to Mary over in HR.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Now you've got a Teams message going right now.
Yep.
Oh, they'll love that real time, triage.
I build the systems. I don't have to make people like them.
I know. Yeah. So questions 4, what role should governance, ethics, and transparency play in AI adoption, and how can companies build trust in AI systems?
I mean, the same. I said this. I think we had this this panel for a CollabTalk a while back, and I answered this kind of question with exactly the same answer. The absolute same thing that it's had for every single implementation across the entirety of technology, which is it. You should have it, and you should strategically plan for it. And if you have been doing things the way that you're supposed to be doing them, then you shouldn't really have to ask this question, because you should already know. We've already got governance. We've already got things in place. So all we're doing is bringing in one new implementation that we're bringing into our existing maturity structure. If you don't already have this in place, you've got a long road to go, because not only is this important with other applications, but when it comes to trust in AI, all that data, to your point, Kevin, talking about security by obscurity, all that stuff that you've had out there for all these years that you've been like, well, they don't know the link, so they can't find it, is going to turn into an absolute big mess if it ethically and governance wise, if you haven't been doing the right things.
Yeah. The thing that I might add to that, Sharon, we have a thing called a Sherpa, and in that Sherpa, we talk about how to build a prompt that's effective and efficient and get to the answer we want. And then we spend time about how to know when Copilot might have very confidently lied to you.
Right.
And the idea is that we're letting folks know this is great technology, does great things. It's going to go and summarize that meeting great, but it may not get it exactly right. Here are tools that you can use to validate what Copilot just told you was the truth.
So trust but verify. Yeah.
Well, and the idea that we're not leadership saying this is the gospel. We're saying this is an answer, now go validate it. And we give them the tools that they can learn to trust that.
Yeah, there's when I do train people on prompt engineering, there's like a validation prompt for that. You just attach at the end of like, give me this result, this output, then come in and explain to me, the sources, validate your responses with the facts that you used to answer the question. So then you can go in and validate. Then it'll actually come up with, it'll answer you, and then it'll give like, and here's the validation, and here's the sources. Well, in Copilot, it's much better. It will provide the sources, links back to docs. If you're using generative AI, ChatGPT, it doesn't provide that, but it'll have like the line item facts where you can then go and search on those facts. Yes, that's true. Yes, that's true. Yes, that's true. And then did these facts actually make it into the answer? Yes, I see them all there. But there are methods for verifying. That's actually some of the additional work that Microsoft did for Copilot to actually come back with links to the source materials. That is, it's necessary to be able to go and look at those. So then you could quickly see, oh, you're pulling from, a 2021 document. I need the latest. Please refresh based on the March 2025 version of this.
And I love that when it's a meeting recap, it has a link to the recording at the right moment.
Yes.
That kills me. That's so awesome.
Yeah.
I think when you go outside, like Copilot, if you think about, for instance, organizations that will scan resumes and then say, yep, Kevin or Sharon or Kirsten and a great candidate, go and hire them. Like when it's really gives that kind of, it's in decision making, it's a whole different set of ethics, that, rather than summarize my meeting. And I think EU with the AI directive, where they're sort of doing what's the level of risk that you are exposed to with using AI. I think some of those things we got to consider internally as well, because there's a big difference, isn't there, between using AI for something quite menial as summarizing a meeting versus are we going to hire or fire someone?
Or diagnostic criteria, especially in the medical field or in the legal field, ensuring that maybe something is, accurate or inaccurate that could ultimately have an impact on, people's livelihood or secure or sensitive information, things like that.
Wait, you're saying that the AI interface now for WebMD should not be trusted? I'm going to go self-diagnosed on. It's already a problem with people's. I'm pretty sure either I'm totally fine or I'm about to die because I read WebMD. Right. There's no in between. It's one or the other.
Yes, but Christian, now AI can tell you exactly how you're going to die.
That's right.
With references.
In either now or sometime in the future.
Correct.
So it's that level of accuracy.
We spend a lot of time talking about validate that what you've got is what you want before you send it to a customer. And we just had that class and came back the next day for the next class in the series. One of my students said, well, I learned at 3:45 that I had a presentation at 4 o'clock. And so I used Copilot to build the deck, and I hadn't even looked at it before I was in front of the class teaching. They're like, this isn't the process we talked about. She's like, but it was beautiful. Like, you got lucky.
That would be, that's almost like that's almost funny. You could have like a series where, where we could, kind of like we do the lightning talks. This is actually an idea for like a user group experiment of short talks where you're given the topic at the beginning or like with like 15 minutes to prepare for it. Go and build the content, build a deck, and then present on it. For 5 minutes or whatever, but you don't get
your PowerPoint.
Yeah, in PowerPoint.
That takes PowerPoint karaoke to a whole new level.
Yeah.
You know what? I think you can probably fake it for 5 minutes, but if you then had to do a Q&A for 15 minutes on that topic, which you really know nothing about, I think you'll be exposed.
Well, to her credit, this was the topic she knew well. Right. And so I'm sure if she had a slide that was completely wrong, she would have just skipped it. And it worked out well for her, but I did give her a little bit of a tongue lashing for no, we just talked about this.
That's so funny. But how fun though. It's the modern days, the AI, scavenger hunt type.
Yeah.
So question 5, how can organizations upskill their workforce to thrive in an AI first environment? What does AI literacy really involve? Sounds like we're all kind of doing a version of this now with clients.
I got to say, I feel really passionate about this. We did a big study on M365 usage patterns, and I know that Microsoft in their Work Trend Index reports love to talk about like how how burned out we all are. Last time was 275 interruptions per day or something like that.
Yeah.
And if you look at the footnotes for the data, they sort of forget conveniently to disclose that the data they're looking at for that particular data point was the top 20% most active people, not the 80%. Top 20% is all those interruptions. And I've seen it before in some of the data. I love the report, but I also go like, okay, yeah, it is sort of marketing, right? And it's like you create like, oh, this is like we're so busy. The reality, though, we found is for most organizations, I think there's the use of M365 is still people are using email and OneDrive as I would say probably like 60% people, that's their world. So to really benefit from AI, I think there's a big investment required to lift their overall M365 maturity levels up. So they start to use different parts of M365 and they start being comfortable in meetings, and they just do lots of things, even just starting to use SharePoint a bit more. So, those documents that actually do sit somewhere where Copilot can find them for other people just than yourself. There's a whole bunch of stuff about lifting normal digital literacy, so we feel comfortable using more of M365. And then when you use them in Copilot, for instance, you've actually got enough digital activity for that really to start to shine. So anyway, that's one of my sort of pet hobbies, is to promote the benefit of actually getting people to work much better across M365, and then AI on top of that.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I love doing, like I did at the Las Vegas conference, the productivity tips. And some of those tips are, there's features that I highlighted that are 15, 20 years old, and there's stuff that's brand new, but it's just like a lot of people don't know about them. And so it's, how do you get the most out of your, the technology that you have today? But you do that by showing, like, here's a scenario. So like right now, for this client, we're building a scenario library for them, showing them a lot of really basic things and walk them through that. So there's a video plus documentation. There's other more complex. We're doing more of deep dives where we're going in and answering in depth around certain workloads, certain areas that are still fairly common that more and more people can use. But building this library of scenarios, sharing those, getting people to go and try them, get them to walk through them at their own pace, and then slowly starting to adopt them, replace other practices. Like, that's how you change the way that people work. That's how you upskill them, because we are creatures of habit. I've always done it this way. I will continue to do it this way. And so you have to train them, replace those habits with a newer, better, healthier habit. But it's a replacement. It's not just, I can't go just sit through an entire class and then do all of those things. You've got to do it one piece after another and iterate on that, and then be supportive of people. And then do some degree of community management where you still see people sending huge attachments by email, is responding to them gently, but like, you should just be sending this as a link, and it then will be the same link that everybody has, and we don't have versions of this document. So you kind of explain it, and you're retraining them. You're rebuilding new connections in their mind of how to do that thing. And so that ongoing gentle pressure, it will get more people to change than, again, one class solves it all.
And also that content governance bit, if my digital literacy is very low, I will send you that file as an attachment. You'll store that as a version 1 in one SharePoint drive. Kevin puts it at version 2 with his comments on another SharePoint drive. It's in email, and when you ask Copilot, what about this, then it'll source the answer from 20 different versions of the same file, because behind the scenes, we haven't really figured out how we're going to store and work in that document together. So that's what I mean. That's really fundamental things that we should invest in.
Well, this is question 6. I know we've kind of, there's some overlap between these, but really, what does success look like for AI initiatives? Which metrics matter the most when you're looking at measuring the impact of being AI first? And maybe, but Kevin and Sharon, kind of think about it from like, what are customers asking for those metrics? How are they looking at the success of a project that you as a consultant working with? Like, what are those measurements of what is the successful initiative?
I would propose that the same metrics you're using right now to measure the success of your business. So average sales deal, average time to resolution, number of first call resolutions, average time between job posting and hire, whatever metrics you're using today, those are the same metrics, because that's what matters today. And as you become a frontier org or a AI first org, that's going to change, right? Because you're going to change the way that you live and do business. But for today, you are measuring what matters. And so keep measuring what matters before and after AI.
Yeah, no, I absolutely 100% agree with that. I think ROI is ROI is ROI. And at the end of the day, whatever your initiatives are and however you're measuring that should stay, for the most part, the same. I think the only thing that I might add is so you can study that like at a business level, but if you want to study specific, like I want to know the impact that adding this AI into our organization has made for us. So I want to like kind of drill down in on that. The only thing that I would add is putting in some sort of scenarios for, I want to measure, for example, this particular use case, this particular scenario before I introduced AI. I want to introduce the AI, and then I want to measure that specific scenario afterwards, knowing that I introduced an AI, piece into this. And I want to know not only what is my ROI on that particular scenario, but also what is the sentiment analysis as well afterwards. So not only is this maybe more, faster, better, improved, but also do the people that are doing it, do the users feel a different way? Do they feel like things went faster? Do they feel like they had more time? Do they feel like they got a better result, right? So there's the mixture of those same ROIs, knowing for sure what was before and after, but also there's the intangible benefit of, did I get more time back that I feel is better? Did I have a sentiment that's better? Because I think that quality is something that AI is supposed to do for us, or automation is supposed to do for us, that we really do need to start quantifying.
So, and I love this, Sharon, and I've said this in other forums as well. The other thing that we metric is employee engagement.
Yes.
Because we as an organization have said, Christian, we love you. We love you so much. We're going to spend $30 a month on you every month so that you never again have to take a note in a meeting. How more engaged are you now than you were before?
Only $30? That's what you think I'm worth?
That's probably double what you're worth, Christian, but we're willing to do it because we love you.
No. I mean, I get that. I mean, even though I think we all recognize then that because the limited capability of Copilot could do a lot today, but there's still some people that are struggling with that cost. I look at the amount of time that I spend going back, looking at past recordings, going through notes, capturing all of that detail, and then doing the project management. And it far bypasses the $30 mark in time that I waste going and pulling that data together. I just like so I'm more than paying for that time, 5-10x every day for that monthly cost.
Well, and when you think about the cost it takes to replace a good quality employee, it in my mind, it makes sense then to let's give them the tool and measure that engagement so that we can see the return on investment of the tool in terms of our ability to keep them around.
Yes. Yeah. No, employee engagement, this is something we don't talk about often enough. I mean, you have to be kind of to a certain level of maturity to have the employee engagement conversation at a reasonable level. But I absolutely agree that AI in general, like there's one thing to just saying, here you go, you can have it, you can use it. There's another thing to implementing it properly and really being able to track that employee engagement, sentiment and maturity level based on introducing tools for the pure factor of making their jobs easier and better.
Get the toil out.
Cai, I know that your studies, the last few years, you have a lot of data around engagement, what engagement is, but the definition of that can vary wildly by organization as well. I mean, what is your approach? How do you look at engagement? And did you pull together any stats specifically on the AI portion of your latest study looking at engagement?
Oh, you're right. Engagement is it's one of those words that can mean so many different things to many different people in many different contexts. So we had to break it down and say, well, for our particular audience, what does it mean for them? So when it comes to internet analytics, it is engagement with the content. It is who's reading, the quality of it. We use lots of different, like how long time you spent on the page compared to how long you should spend on it. And just as a little for fun experiment, we looked at all the news that people are publishing, and we find out on average, if someone was to engage with all of that news in a week, they would have to spend 23 hours and 10 minutes if they read all of it, like in a work week of about 40 hours. Now, of course, no one is doing that, but it means that audience targeting becomes so incredibly important. And also, I think from an AI perspective, you've got to think about, well, all that content that was relevant 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago with all news items, are they also indexed by my AI bot? Is that relevant? That whenever I say who is our CEO, and it finds a news article 5 years ago for 2 CEOs ago who was promoted. So I think the engagement bit is interesting, both on the intranet side. There's also on the whole thing with employee engagement, having conversations, co-pilot communities, how they're performing, who are the opinion leaders, what are people talking about, what are the most exciting conversations that are happening. All that is engagement. Finding your informal influencers in the AI community is really interesting if you want to drive change and make that go faster. So engagement can mean a lot of different things. And if you dive into communities, you want to find out how they're performing and their special metrics and things that are unique to that, whether you're talking about conversations or content. So content engagement is different for conversation engagement. Was that too long an answer? Probably was.
No, I mean, look, we could have an hour-long discussion just around engagement and how to improve that.
Yeah.
But in looking at time here, we're just about out. Question 7, what's the one thing most organizations get wrong about becoming AI first, and how would you help them correct it?
I'm going to answer that. I think that the number one thing most organizations get wrong is that they think AI is a tool implementation, not a cultural change. And I think if they can understand that it's a cultural shift, it's the way that you work, not the thing that you use, then I think all of a sudden you think about it in a completely different way.
Yeah.
I love that answer, and I would add to it, the other thing I see is that organizations think it's a light switch. They turn it on and they're done. Yeah. And that's so far from the truth. I mean, there's the organizational stuff, but there's also just a ton of back-end things that you should be doing to make sure that security is still in place. I mean, we recently heard about Microsoft has a tool now that will raise an alert when somebody tries to jailbreak your AI, right? Somebody's out asking questions of Copilot they shouldn't be asking. Who's watching that alert? And there's just a million different little things like that organizations should be looking at adding to their toolkit as they keep the content secure and keep the right eyes looking at it and the wrong eyes not.
Yeah. Go ahead, Cai.
Ditto. Perfect. I'd say one of the surprises I found is that in the internal communicators, actually, it's probably the last thing I would have thought someone that would lean into new technology. Like it just, there's just my prejudices that are shining through, but they really are. And I think it's because they do a lot of content writing, editing, and work a lot with content. So I would encourage anyone listening to go and talk to their internal commerce people. I would be surprised if they're not already all over AI in some form. They just need an IT partner to work with and make even more happen.
Shadow AI.
Yeah. Hey, there you go. I think that's great. You should hashtag that and put your name next to that.
Yeah, I'm not the first to say shadow AI, but it's a big deal. And 80% of the people that are using AI are doing it in ways that we as IT leaders would want them to not do it.
100%. No, I definitely see. And I think this is why this is so important. If you understand that it's a business shift, what's happening is people are implementing new ways of working, new processes in a way that you as leadership cannot control. Because if we think back to like when SharePoint came out and My Sites came out and social media was, really becoming big, and a lot of the management and leadership in organizations was really struggling to control the messaging, control the narrative. And I just remember somebody said to me, yeah, but Sharon, if they posted on the My Site, they could say something bad about somebody. I'm like, I could literally write something bad about somebody and put a Post-it note on their monitor right now. The difference is if they do it on a My Site or if they do it on the intranet, I know who did it and I can audit it, right? It's manageable. And I think it's the same thing with AI. These people, running around and doing all of these things, they're going to do it anyways. The difference is if you give them the right tools to be successful, you can have some control around it in a way that's going to allow you to stay, managing it properly. Whereas if you just kind of let them go run amok and have the shadow AI situation, they're going to do it no matter what.
Yeah.
Well, you've seen, Sharon, that organizations that allow that user-generated content compared to orgs that don't, these guys are a team. They're family.
Yep.
And these guys go to work.
Yep.
And there's such a huge difference in what each of these organizations can produce and how effective and efficient they are. If you're not doing UCG, you're losing.
Yep.
Yep. Well, hey, thank you so much for participating. Great discussion as always in the panel. And again, Cai, thank you for SWOOP Analytics for sponsoring this month's episode. Of course, we'll have the links out to everybody to go and download the latest report. And so you get the stats. And of course, we will have sent this out a number of times. We'll send it out a few more times, a few more social media promotions of that report. So it's always good to get good content out in people's hands. So thank you so much, everybody. And we'll see you next month. We'll be back with a new topic and do this TweetJam thing all over again. So thanks a lot.
Woo!
Bye.
Bye.